Hello, everyone. This is Terry with CU Bands and Fans, and I'm here with
Zach Widup.
and Zach and I are doing our Tuesday podcast. We are sponsored tonight by Homegrown KIO. Homegrown KIO is on 107.9 FM. Sunday evenings at 7 p.m., they run a jam-packed hour of local music from local musicians from the Champaign-Urbana area every Sunday at 7 p.m. Tune in to WKIO 107.9 FM. Thank you, Homegrown. Our special guest tonight is Sean Kutzko. And Sean is the organizer and the founder of Shambana Jazz. Sean, what made you begin to do Shambana Jazz? And do you have anybody that's on your team helping you with this?
Well, first off, Jerry, thanks for having me on the podcast. It's good to get together with you and Zach. You know, Zach and I have known each other for a long time, so it's good to be here on the show. What got me interested in doing Shambana Jazz? Well, I've been a part of the music community for a while. I started off as a rocker, just like everybody else. But a couple of things happened in the early 1980s. I started doing a show on WEFT, and the guy who was on before me was one of their jazz air shifters, and he got me turned on to jazz that way. And a couple of years after that, I started working at an old club here in town called Nature's Table, which was around from 1979 to 1991, right across the street from Krannert Center. And being a musician, I got to 10 bar there and work the lunch crowd and stuff like that. And I got to hear these musicians playing this type of music that moved me, but I didn't understand why, because they were playing some really interesting melodies and some odd chords and things like that. And I didn't understand technically what was going on, but it really affected me and I really liked what I heard. So that was what opened the doors to jazz for me, was being an air shifter on Weft and working at Nature's Table, which was at that point in time one of the best jazz clubs in town. I started Shambana Jazz because I got interested in recording and documenting this music that I was hearing in the 1980s. I bought a pretty decent little portable cassette recorder and a couple of microphones, and I started taking that gear with me to the gigs at these small clubs, and I started recording the musicians doing their thing. And I didn't think that it had any value other than me going back and listening to it later, just for personal enjoyment. What happened was Nature's Table closed in 1991, and it turned out to be Nature's Table was a major hub for the community who was interested in jazz and folk music. Much like Mabel's was the big draw for the rock and roll crowd, the same period of time, there was a whole other scene going on campus and in town at Nature's Table and a couple of other venues that were catering to jazz and folk. And when Nature's Table closed, there were a lot of people who were very upset by the way that it closed and wanted to hold on to the memories of that place because it had a deep impact in that aspect, that part of the community. So all of a sudden, all these tapes that I recorded at Nature's Table became very valuable commodities. And I learned from talking to other people that other people recorded shows there as well. And I started trying to figure out a way that we could gather as many of these recordings as possible and post them so that people who remembered Nature's Table or who were just fans of jazz in the community could go back and listen to these local musicians and enjoy the music that they remembered making, because obviously jazz is a very improvisational music, so you're not going to get the same show from night to night. It's going to be very, very different. So we started a website called naturestable.net that is all about remembering what happened at Nature's Table, both from a food standpoint, a community standpoint, but also preserving the recordings that we could find that were made there. And we've uncovered a couple hundred different recordings that were made at Nature's Table over that period of time. So we started gathering all these recordings. At this point, I was working with one of the great jazz promoters in this community, Jeff Machota, who worked at Nature's Table with me and has been doing a jazz show on WEFT for 30 years. So he's one of the jazz authorities in town. And we were collecting all of these cassette recordings that people had made at Nature's Table, but we were also getting a whole bunch of recordings that were made before Nature's Table existed and after Nature's Table had closed. Well, the website that we created was only focused on Nature's Table. So we had a whole bunch of recordings and we didn't know what to do with them because there was no site to post them on. So they just kind of started accumulating and we just held on to them and we didn't really do anything with them. I moved out to the East Coast for quite a while. I was out there for 12 years, but I'd come back to town to visit family and friends and whatnot. And I'd always end up at the Iron Post and I'd bring my little cassette recorder or digital recorder at this point, the mid 2000s. And I'd always try to record a show at the Iron Post just to, get continue to have my fingers in the local scene a little bit, record some of the artists that I enjoyed, and I just simply enjoy recording live shows. I've been recording live shows in town since 1985. So for me, I've got the recording bug. I love recording live music, and I've never been able to really stop that. So I ended up with all of these tapes of jazz and a couple other types of music here and there. And then I moved back to town in June of 2019, and it coincided with the Iron Post starting to wind down, unfortunately, the Rose Bowl picking up a little bit more jazz programming, and then COVID hit, and I had all of these tapes and all of these recordings of jazz that were made in local venues here in town. And I didn't want to just sit on them anymore. I wanted to share them with the community and post memories for people who were at these shows or who remembered these musicians. Just like in the rock community, we're starting to lose people in the jazz music community as well. So having recordings of these people in their heyday, creating their art, is very important to remember these folks by, because this is what they're known for, is this great music. So in September of 2021, I created Shambana Jazz primarily as a source for posting these recordings that were made of jazz musicians and jazz music here in town.
So there is so much in there that
That's a very long answer. Sorry about that.
No, but it was great. It was perfect. So why did Nature's Table close down?
Nature's Table, unfortunately, was sitting on a parcel of land that they were renting the building, but the university owned the land, and the university decided they wanted to expand and build another science building. So the university basically said, "We want the property, so you got to go."
Oh no.
And
And and I know that Paul Wirth from the Iron Post, who owned the Iron Post. Yeah, and COVID had a huge effect on the Iron Post and on Paul as well, and the struggle was great. But then to have lost him was very impactful, and in the music community, not just jazz, but the entire music community was affected greatly by that loss. And then of course the Iron Post closed. Don't know what's happening with it now. But then the Rose Bowl did pick up a lot of that live music. But is there anywhere else that, as I know Boomerangs did Tuesday nights for about 4 years?
About 4 or 5 years, yeah. Tom deserves a lot of credit for promoting jazz at Boomerangs for that time.
Yeah, and it was nice because it was in the warmer months. It'd be outside on the patio, and it was really nice. So yeah, Boomerangs obviously always supports live music no matter what. And so but is there some different
Nola's Rock Bar.
Yeah,
Nola's
Nola.
Rock Bar has some jazz.
Yeah, Nola's Rock Bar has a jazz happy hour on Fridays from 5 to 7, and they also bring in jazz on other evenings as well. Usually, it's an earlier show. It'll be like if they've got two shows a night, it'll be the early show. Most jazz in this town at this point is earlier in the day or early in the evening, and then that frees up the venues to do rock shows at night. That's how the Rose Bowl does it. I know also Alto Vineyards has jazz on occasion, so Alto Vineyards is another good venue for that. But really, the Iron Post was the home for jazz in this town for a long, long time. And when Paul got sick and ultimately passed away, and the Iron Post closed, the Rose Bowl deserves a lot of credit for picking up jazz in this town. They have jazz now several nights a week. Usually it's an early show, but they've got several jazz offerings every week, and it's not just like the old jazz veterans who are playing this music now. There's a large contingent of students at the university music program, and they are getting out and they are doing shows, and they are top shelf musicians, and they are worth going to go see.
That is wonderful. That is good to hear.
Yep.
So you opened this page and you opened it in 2020, you say?
2021, September 21.
Oh yeah, because I know I came upon it. I believe I came upon it on Instagram. Is
Right.
Yeah.
We're pushing. Well, I say we. Uh, we're pushing as much social media out there as we possibly can. We've got a Facebook page. We got a website that hosts all of these recordings. We've got Instagram, Twitter, SoundCloud, YouTube. We're trying to get the message out there as much as possible.
Your Facebook page is facebook.com/Chambana Jazz. That's Chambana Jazz. So anyone that's on Facebook, please go and hit like on that page and check their page out. Browse it for a while. There's a lot of video. There's a lot of information. And your website, I love. I was just on your website a while ago. It's really well laid out. It's simple. It's informative. It's beautiful. And that's shambanajazz.com is your website. So you are doing this. You're basically documenting and have been documenting jazz locally for years. And you're just now, after compiling all of this, you're just now kind of like putting it out there and sharing it with everyone and trying to, I guess, make people aware of jazz and where it's at. And like you said, there's been some losses. I think recently, wasn't there another huge loss in the jazz community?
Well, there was the loss of there have been a few musicians in the past 2 or 3 years that have really affected the community. So there was a composer here in town named Tom Painter who was very, very big in the community for a long time. Brilliant composer. Did everything from gut bucket blues to some rather avant-garde stuff, which was always fun to listen to. Gary Payton was a tremendous drummer here in town. He came from the University of North Texas and originally was a piano player here in the 80s, but he also played drums. And later on, he was primarily one of the go-to drummers for the jazz community here in town. He used to do. I remember seeing him several times in the early 2000s. He was backing up a great jazz singer here in town that had been around for a while named Rachel Lee, who was performing all throughout Champaign-Urbana and East Central Illinois in the 80s and 90s. And Gary backed her up. We lost him a few years ago. It's very important that the musicians and the creators of this art are preserved and remembered as best as we can. Any genre of music, it's not just jazz. Anybody.
Donnie Heitler, I thought of him.
Yep, Donnie Heitler. We lost him a few years ago. One of the great pianists in town. Played with a lot of really good people. Very good friends with a great jazz pianist named George Shearing. They hung out for many years. Yeah, Donnie Heitler was like Donnie Heitler knew every song of the Great American Songbook that you could possibly think of. I mean, he just knew it. He was a walking encyclopedia of that stuff. It was pretty amazing.
That's so wild.
Yep.
Yeah. And we've had some really tremendous losses in music in this community, in all of the music and the genres. But I really respect what you're doing. We feel the passion. We know kind of like that wanting to get that out there for everyone and for making everyone aware that you have this, you have these recordings and you have this. It's truly a treasure, and it takes a special person to be dedicated to that and to want to get that out there in the music scene and to the community and to fans of jazz. So it's a tremendous thing, and you're taking this on yourself. And had you considered, because that's a big undertaking. I mean, what we do, I don't know what I would do if I didn't have Zach, honestly, because he takes on certain aspects of what we do that I can't get to. And I respect him so much, and I enjoy the fact that we're really a good team. I really got lucky. So what about you? Do you seek out looking for someone that could contribute to this and
Oh, that's a good question. To be honest, I've been so busy with it, I haven't really contemplated that. I mean, I'm maintaining the website with historical documentation, because I'm not just trying to promote the local musicians here in town, although I would say that's the primary thrust. But I'm also, I'm going through old newspaper archives, and I'm posting news stories about what the jazz scene was like here, as far back as I can find information. Ragtime music, and then old minstrel shows, all of these musical sources that jazz derived from. The earliest reference I've found to this stuff was in a newspaper article from about 1885. There were performances of ragtime and minstrel music in Champaign-Urbana going back that far. So I'm doing the research. I'm out in the community recording 2 or 3 jazz gigs a week and posting those up to the website as fast as I possibly can, all while holding down a full-time job at the university as one of their video techs at the business college. So it's a labor of love. And I'm also trying to make sure that I promote the gigs that pop up. I have a lot of help from another jazz organization here in town called cujazz.org, and they are that's administered by one of the great trumpet players here in town, Jeff Helgeson, who's been around forever. He's been playing in bands since the early
Jeff
1980s.
Machota is pretty involved in that too.
Yes, he is. Yes. Jeff Machota and Jeff Helgeson are both very involved with CU Jazz, but they're focused mainly on getting the jazz dates right. Who's playing where, much like what you do for the rock and roll community. Hey, if you want to go see Jeff Helgeson and friends, go here Friday night at 5 o'clock. That kind of stuff. I'm getting information from them about who is playing where, but my primary focus is promoting the musicians that are playing now, recording them, and making sure those recordings are preserved.
yeah, you're documenting.
Exactly.
And that there's a big difference in promoting or just making people aware of who's playing where, and actually documenting it. And we somewhat, not to the depth that you are at. No way are we at that kind of a depth, but we definitely document the live local music scene, and with video and photography and and that kind of a thing. So I think what you're doing is very important to the Champaign-Urbana area, and I think that we will do all we can to support you and to get your page out there as well, and what you're doing by having you on this podcast, and by also we are going to share your page and as often as we can,
Well,
and
thank you.
on Instagram and so forth. Because when I did run across you on Instagram, I think you tagged me or something in a post or something. I was like, well, who is this? So I went and checked it out, and I read, I noticed there was a big difference immediately when I read what you were about, because, you said archiving and, documenting and that kind of a thing. Then when I went to your website, you kind of spell that out too on your website, that the libraries and the music that you have archived, that kind of a thing. And so I was like, this is really special. And I hope that we bring a lot of awareness to this. And I hope that it brings more people to go, hey, what can we do for you, Sean? Or we have this, or we have that. What can we do for you to help you, continue to move forward in what you're doing? Because this is really a tremendous thing. I personally know many friends that are just jazz heads, is what I call them. They love jazz. And one in particular is Rick Sadowski. And he owns a recording studio. He listens literally every single morning. His post is smooth jazz. He's listening to jazz every morning. And so I recommended, I say, hey, Rick, you got to get on this page then. You need to go over here and get on that page and start following them and what they're doing. But if you were to, well, I think that you're what you're doing is very valuable, not only to the music scene, but I think just historically, in the Champaign-Urbana area.
Yeah, that's one of the driving forces behind me. Is I want to document as much jazz history in Champaign-Urbana as I can possibly find. And that's not, I want to learn the names of the local musicians who played in this town in the 1920s, for example. And I've uncovered a few of them, not a lot, but a few.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
There's several aspects of jazz history in this town that I want to learn more about. I want to study about the national acts that came through. Champaign-Urbana was a very uniquely positioned hub between St. Louis and Chicago and Indianapolis. So there were a lot of national acts that passed through here. I've got documentation in some of the newspaper archives of people coming through town, big names going back into the 1920s. Every major jazz artist that you can think of has played here. Louis Armstrong played here. Dave Brubeck played here. McCoy Tyner, the pianist for John Coltrane's classic quartet from the 1960s, played here. Elvin Jones, the drummer, played here. I mean, everybody stopped in this town and played here.
I saw Maynard Ferguson.
Maynard Ferguson played here. Dizzy Gillespie played here. Duke Ellington played in this town 13 times throughout his career. I think his first appearance in town was 1929, and his last appearance was 1972. They were gonna play, he was booked to play Krannert Center in January of 1974, but that was when he got really, really sick with lung cancer, and he had to cancel that tour, and he ended up dying in May of 74. So he was scheduled to be here yet another time. But yeah, Duke Ellington, one of the greatest American composers of the 20th century, played in this town 13 times.
See, that is crazy. I'd have never known that had I not talked to you. Ever. That's fascinating.
Yeah, I love doing the research on this stuff. It's tremendous amounts of fun, and it's like people get lost on going down the the YouTube rabbit hole, as we call it. You just start watching video after video. Well, I do that too, but I'm trying to get away from that and spend more time going through the newspaper archives for Champaign County, because I can find interesting stuff like that. There's a lot of stories out there about amazing talent that came through. I was talking about Louis Armstrong earlier. So for those of you who know your jazz history, Louis Armstrong, came from New Orleans, and his big break was he moved to Chicago around 1920 or 1921 to follow his idol, which was another trumpet player from New Orleans named King Oliver, who took up residency in this place called the Lincoln Gardens in Chicago in the early 1920s. And Louis Armstrong was like his protege. And King Oliver called for Louis Armstrong from New Orleans to come up and join him in Chicago. And Louis Armstrong stuck around in that band for a long, long time, but he left. He got an offer to go to New York City in September of 24. Well, King Oliver was hired to play a senior dance at the University of Illinois in June of 1924. And as much as I've dug around and poked around this story, I can't find any confirmation that Louis Armstrong was on that gig, but Louis Armstrong was in King Oliver's band in June of 1924. So there is very strong evidence that Louis Armstrong was in this town playing a senior dance at the university in 1924.
Now that is just insane. That's, you must just be like, when you're digging through this and you're getting this information and you're researching, do you get like really excited?
Oh, hell yeah. To me, this is tremendous amounts of fun. I'm like, who's this guy? Tell me about that guy, and just doing the work for all of this stuff. There was, I'm sure every musician knows about the great jazz guitarist Wes Montgomery because he influenced so many people. Well, he was based out in Indianapolis, and in the 50s and 60s, and he played in Danville many weekends a year. He would come over to Danville and play, and that naturally led to getting gigs in Champaign. And the university used to have this program at the Illini Union called Jazz You Like It, or Jazz U, and that got started in the late 40s. And it started off just as a gathering place for jazz fans, students mostly, where they would play records. And they would talk about the newest records from, Benny Goodman or the swing bands of the era. That was the big thing at that point in time. Glenn Miller and Artie Shaw and those folks. And but in the 1940s and 50s, it started to shift to where they were getting live musicians to come in and play, mainly students, some townsfolk, which was an interesting challenge because the university music department did not have a jazz program at that time. So these were all students who were pursuing what at that point was the popular music of the day. So they're developing their interest in the music. They're playing it to other students and getting some townsfolk involved. And Jazz You Like It evolved from a place to go listen to jazz records to a place where you could go listen to a jazz band. And there were lots and lots of local musicians who passed through that program at the Illini Union in the 50s and 60s. Donnie Heitler got his start there when he was a freshman in 1956, I believe, 57, and he was like the pianist for quite a while on the University of Illinois campus in the 50s and 60s as a student. There was another fellow who came down from Chicago in 1960, a saxophonist named Ron Dewar, who was a huge player in this town for many years, and he was instrumental in getting involved with the first formal jazz program at the University of Illinois, who was led by John Garvey, who I'm sure many people remember that name from the University of Illinois days in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. So John Garvey, largely developed the jazz program at the University of Illinois at that point in time, and led the University of Illinois Jazz Band on several national level competitions. And there was a very famous tour of Russia that occurred as well. That was championed by the university. I believe that was like 1969. And that really put the University of Illinois on the map. And as a result of John Garvey's work, there was a lot of high profile jazz artists that came through town to play with the University of Illinois band. There was a jazz festival at Krannert Center in 1971 that had many greats came through town. The pianist Bill Evans, one of the great jazz pianists of all time, came through and played with the band for a little bit. Clark Terry, a trumpet player, was here. Major names in the jazz world came here because of that. And I got sidetracked a little bit. I was talking about West Montgomery just a little bit ago, and the Jazz You Like It program at the Union. West Montgomery, one of the greatest guitar players of any genre of all time, played with a little trio at the Illini Union in May of 1964.
That's awesome. That's just so awesome. And Champaign-Urbana anyway is very, very rich in music and talent, and those that have went nationally that came from here, played here, and at the Red Lion and all them places they used to have live music all the time. Is back in the 70s, back in the 70s was live music was just everywhere. And
that's the exact point that I'm trying to emphasize with doing the research in this site, is that the music scene in this town has been around for decades, and people have been consuming music in lots of clubs in this town since the 19-teens. There was
that's so crazy to me.
And the kids, the students, the kids were into it. They were into it. There was a soda shop on campus in the early 1900s, like 1907, 1908. There was an ice cream shop that would feature bands at that point in time, and that was the hip spot. If you were a co-ed on campus, you went to this ice cream shop, and that was like the cool place to go. Like that was the in spot. That was the in spot. There was so you remember I'm gonna get the name wrong on that. So you remember where Cafe Espresso is on the corner of Goodwin and Oregon?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So that used to be Trino's.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Trino's was where the U of I jazz band would play on a regular basis in the 60s and 70s. And I've got a couple of recordings of the U of I jazz band playing Trino's in like 1974 that are pretty amazing, because a lot of the players in that band are now on faculty at the U of I jazz program. So
oh my goodness.
Yeah, so that was when they were cutting their teeth as young musicians. But that building was built in. I'm going to get the dates on this wrong. I've got some of this stuff written down, but basically that corner has been having live music since the 1940s, 1950s. So that corner, that building has been around, and music has been played in that building since, for about 80 years or so.
And see, I'd love to see photos of that.
It's all out there. It's all out there.
Is it really?
Oh yeah, it's out there.
Because I would really love to see that, photos of that, and back then, especially, I guess just being a photographer,
Mm-hmm.
I would just really love to see, that would be awesome.
Yep. Their campus had at least 2 large ballrooms that were real popular for during the swing era for dances and stuff like that.
What?
Yeah. Yep. And the big one though was the Robeson building. The Robeson building for 7 years, from 1930 to about 1937, 1938, had a ballroom on the roof.
Wow.
And everybody played there. Everybody played there. That was there's a book about the Robeson building, the department store. I was doing some work in that. And there are a couple of quotes from folks talking about I believe it was called the Robeson Roof, is what it was called. And,
literally on the roof.
On the roof. Yeah, they built an enclosure, and it was a high class place. There are several quotes from students, from men and women reminiscing about their time at the university in the 1930s in that book. And the common theme was, there were a couple of dance halls and ballrooms that we could go to on campus, but if you wanted to like have a really special night with that young lady of yours, you took them to the Robeson Roof, because that was a high class joint, and that was where you went to see national acts, big bands, and you treated your lady right at that spot, and they worked hard to maintain that place.
I think that is just so cool.
Yep. Lots of major swing bands played up there, lots of them. So,
Man, that's
and there's so much more, there's so much history to uncover about all of the music scene in this town. You've got the bona fide jazz clubs in this town going back to the 1950s or so. You've got the university component that goes back to well into the 1880s. You've got the community at large going to go see shows at all sorts of theaters that existed in this town in the 1910s, 1920s, 1930s. But a component of the music that gets kind of, I don't want to say swept under the rug, but there's not that many people out there talking about it. Excuse me, is the music scene in the African American community here in the 1950s, 1960s. I mean, if you go, there were several establishments up on First Street in Champaign in the 1960s or so that there was some pretty damn good music being played up there, and all those places are gone. And I want to learn more about what the scene was like up there, because there were a lot of heavy hitters that played up there. George Benson spent a fair amount of time in this town early in his career. He was playing with another local musician here in town named Jack McDuff, who became he started off as a pianist, but he became one of the great Hammond B3 players of all time. And he was from right here in town. He started off as a young piano player playing at Katsina's restaurant when it was still north of the Orpheum Theater in Champaign in the 1950s. He had a regular gig up there. And then
I saw George Benson at a place called Ruby Gulch that was here back in the 70s.
Yep.
They had a lot of jazz.
Yeah, they sure
Where
did.
was that? Where was that Ruby? Where was that located at?
That was on Green Street, wasn't it?
Green and I think what's now Green and Second or Green and Third, thereabouts.
Yeah, that was a pretty hip place in its day. There were a lot of musicians that came through that club. It seated about 150, 200 people,
That's about right.
they would get acts of all different kinds there. They get rock, folk, jazz. They were hip. And I wish I was a little bit older so that I could have gone to see some shows there, but I was still pretty young at that point in time.
Who managed that?
Gosh, I don't.
I have his name somewhere. Someone sent it to me. I don't remember it. I do have that name somewhere though.
But
so if you were to bring this into our current world, mm-hmm. And our community, what would you like to see happen with what you've documented, and what would you like to see happen as far as like the community and venues that would host more jazz and more live music? Downtown Champaign's changed a lot. The face, we did lose a few venues there. It's just really changed. Right. And I'm always wanting to revive everything. I'm always wanting it. Like, can we bring this back? Can we do this? Can we, but I just think it's changed so much, and it's the drastic change in the last 2 years is leaving us all going, like we're almost just waiting for that gate to open. Right. And then I just feel like we're just all going to go whoosh, there we all are again. I feel like summer is going to be really good for that.
Yep.
But as far as venues, there was some great venues. There used to be, when you're talking about, and when I was growing up, really, really great venues. And we just don't have that anymore.
Mm-hmm. I would say there are a couple of things at play here. Number one, lack of venues in this town. Well, if I'm a business owner, especially in this current climate where trade of music and food and whatnot is taking a significant hit because of COVID, I'm going to want to make sure that if I'm going to hire a band, they need to bring an audience in. And the simple fact of the matter is that jazz does not bring as many people out as rock and roll does. And I think that's BS, frankly. But if I'm a business owner, that's probably what they're looking at. It's like, look, I got to pay rent just like everybody else. I need a band in here that's gonna, bring people in and buy liquor and help me make some money so I can pay the bills.
Hence why they have them earlier in the
Well,
evening.
well, I mean, let's look at the demographics too. I mean, with the exception of the music, the student musicians here in town, I would say that a large number of the jazz consumers in this town are probably older folks. And, I know that as I've gotten older, I'm not as interested in hanging out late anymore. I gotta go to bed and get up and go to work the next day. Even when I was, like I'm a musician still, I play in a couple of bands here in town. I don't want to play a late night gig on a Thursday night. I'm an older person, like I'll go see my music from 5 to 7 or 5 to 8 and I'll have a great time, but as a business owner, that's, there are some really tough economic decisions that have to be made about who you're going to put on your stage if you have one. What do I want to see? Well, obviously I want to see more people get out there and explore jazz. I think, I mean, jazz is mysterious. Jazz is confusing to a lot of people. I mean, a common complaint about jazz is it sounds like 5 people are playing a different song at the same time, and if you're used to hearing rock and roll, that's, 3 or 4 chords, and jazz definitely can sound pretty complex compared to that if you're not used to hearing that kind of music. What do I want to see? I would like to see more musicians in this town support all facets of music and musicians. I think what would be really cool is to have some venue somewhere host a summit between the rock community and the jazz community and try to get some people together and see what they can do together. Host a workshop, just a hangout jam session, whatever you want to call it. But I think that there are a lot of folks who are missing out on a lot of great music because they're letting past prejudices decide what they're willing to listen to and what they're not willing to listen to. And the end result of that is that everybody is missing out on some kick-ass music in this town.
That is well said. I have nothing to add to that because you said it all right there. And I think you're 100% right. I think you're 100% accurate. What was you going to say, Zach?
I'm hoping to see the Groove Lemons again sometime soon.
Oh, well, thank you. That's a little bit of shameless self-promotion. So that's
so you said you were in 2 bands. Is that one of them?
Yeah, the Groove Lemons is this brand new group that just popped up in the last few months. That's a 7-piece combo that plays jazz fusion from the 1970s. So bands like Weather Report and Return to Forever and Herbie Hancock with his band the Headhunters from that period of time. So you've got horns, you've got keyboards, you've got guitar, and you've got a real funky beat, and that, but you've got jazz melodies on top of all of that. So it's pretty cool stuff. I also am the drummer for a country Grateful Dead band called Silverweed that has Jay Rosenstein on guitar and Jim Rowland on the bass, and Jesse Brown's been playing keys with us for a little while too, and that's a lot of fun. We
Oh,
play every
he's
month
good.
up at the
He's
Rosebowl.
good.
Yep.
He's good. Yeah, Silverweed. Now, see, that's another one. This Silverweed came up, and I was like, well, who's Silverweed? You know, who are they? And I'm like, well, they're new. You know, cool. And then the other one, Zach went to see. You guys debuted, I think. And Zach was able to go to that, and he messaged. He goes, oh, that was tremendous.
Front row
That was
center,
really
baby.
good.
He was front row center.
Yeah, he usually is if he goes to a show. He's usually tries to get right up there. And did you get photos?
No,
Zach?
I didn't, unfortunately. Next time.
Zach, I might have to fire you. I don't know what to say.
I've seen most of the Silverweed shows too.
That's true. That's true. You're always there. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's you know, I love playing music just as much as any other musician in this town. But for me, there's also you know, I guess I'm just a bit of a history buff and a bit of a techno geek and some of this stuff too, because I like learning about the history of the music. And you know, like I'll read any musician's biography. I don't care if it's from a musician or a genre I like or not. I just like learning about music and musicians. So for me, doing the deep dive into history here in this town of jazz and other forms of music is just you know, that's a natural for me. You know, I mean, give me access to a newspaper archive and I'll be happy for a week.
Yeah, and I love documentaries.
Yep.
Music documentaries. I mean, just any musician, I don't care.
Mhm.
I want to know, like, how did they begin this? What happened in their journey? You know, where are they now? What are they doing now? How did they used to record? You know, the whole thing. I'm fascinated by it, and I love. I really, really dislike. I go with digital because you have to. You know, I'll download digital stuff, but if I've got something tangible, if your music is on something tangible, I'm going to go for that first.
Mm-hmm.
I will get the digital, but I want that tangible thing. I want to look at it, and I want to, you know, read it and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And that is so special, I think. And I've always felt that way, even when I was a kid. And, you know, albums, record albums,
Mm-hmm.
the covers of them I was like, why did they pick this cover?
Mm-hmm.
What made them decide they wanted this cover?
Mm-hmm.
Who did this cover? Where did they do this at? I mean, all of that. And when I became a photographer, I was like, well, music and photography, no wonder.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's no wonder that just kind of like went together for me. And I'm still fascinated by that. I would so much rather have that album cover. I don't care if it's a CD or what, but just that tangible thing,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Miles Davis Live has a rather unique album cover.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
I'll have to check that out. I don't know what you guys are talking about.
Well, you know, tangible product in the music community. You know, there are several jazz groups here, mainly younger, mainly graduate students through the University of Illinois music program that have CDs for sale. You know, there are lots of groups in this town that are putting out product and selling CDs at all of their shows. But again, you don't have a whole lot of people showing up to this music, which is too bad because you're missing out. You know,
especially with young people.
Absolutely.
You know, to go and if they're interested in that, they're out there and they're beginning to get into the live, you know, music scene, we definitely need to be supporting that.
Well, I would say if you're interested, like there's nothing better for a good music community to build a music community in any town. There is nothing better for that than the curious consumer. And if you are a curious consumer and you're willing to take a chance on some new stuff and willing to, roll the dice and go check out something that you're not that familiar with, you have a lot of opportunities to do that in this town. There are a lot of different types of jazz being played in this community right now. You've got straight ahead jazz with a piano and an upright bass and a drummer and a saxophone or a trumpet. You've got that straight ahead stuff. You've got more funky types of jazz with an organ and a couple of horns, or maybe an organ trio where you've got a Hammond B3 player and a guitarist and a drummer. You've got that kind of stuff that's a little more funky and a little more gritty. You've got traditional music that's being played. So if you're interested in learning about hot jazz or traditional jazz from the 1920s, there are a couple of groups in town that are doing that kind of stuff. There are jazz groups that focus on Latin and Brazilian musics. So there's a huge diversity of types of jazz you can hear in this community, because we've got a world-class university with a world-class music program that's teaching people how to do this stuff, and they're going out and they're playing shows every week. If you're willing to take a chance, go to one of the jazz happy hours that the Rose Bowl has, or one of the happy hours at Nola's Rock Bar, or if you see a jazz show coming up at Alto Vineyards, go check it out. Most of these bands are playing primarily for tips and donations. There's not going to be a cover charge to go see the vast majority of this music in town. So from a financial standpoint, you're not putting out a whole lot of cash to walk through the door. Obviously, if you like what you hear, those musicians are up there playing for tips just like every other band in town. If you like what you hear, give them a few bucks, because I'll tell you, going up on a stage a few times a week and creating something brand new each time you go out there and do it, that's hard work. So, if you like what you hear, please reward the musicians with a couple of bucks, because it makes a difference to them. But go out and listen to some of this music. I don't think that I don't think that the average person is going to be completely put off by hearing some different chords, or trying to figure out what a melody is, or a band that doesn't have a vocalist, for example. Those are things that are not that far removed from a good rock and roll band. They're just not that far apart. And a curious consumer, if you're willing to roll the dice, I guarantee you're going to find some amazing jazz in this town that you will like and respond to.
Yeah, I really think that you are doing what you need to be doing, because on behalf of the jazz community, you've enlightened me. I feel totally enlightened to to all of it. I'm not a huge jazz fan,
Mhm.
and that's neither here nor there. Music is music to me, and we don't discriminate, like, well, we're not going to go because we don't like that genre or whatever. We don't do that. But I definitely feel encouraged and inspired to go and hear these young people and go to hear more jazz. I probably Chip O'Neill, is that his name?
Chip McNeil.
Chip McNeil, yes. I've heard him at the Iron Post. I've heard the U of I Jazz Band at the Iron Post. So that's been I'm very limited. What I've heard at the Iron Post is what I've heard, and that's basically it.
Well, come on out to the Rose Bowl and Nola's Rock Bar and check out what they have to offer as well. Like I said, the Rose Bowl has got several jazz shows every week, and right now, if you're a musician in this town and you're curious about playing jazz, and you might, if you think you might want to explore this a little bit more as a musician, the Rose Bowl is sponsoring a jazz jam session every Tuesday night from 9 to 11. And it is open to any musician in this town that is genuinely curious about learning more and playing real jazz. So if you are a musician and you're curious about this stuff, show up to the Jazz Jam on Tuesday nights from 9 to 11. I guarantee you will be welcomed with open arms.
Well, we'll definitely put that on our list. If it's not it's probably already on there, isn't it, Zach?
Yes, yes.
Zach doesn't miss much.
Yep.
I'm sure I'm saying that going, he's probably already got it on the event list. Yeah, so that's wonderful. I think what you're doing is you're very passionate about it. You're extremely knowledgeable. And I love this interview with you. Because I myself have learned so much just with this time with you and listening. I also feel like that we're definitely going to be sharing your page. We're definitely going to be, helping get the word out about what you're doing on your page and your website. So if I wanted to hear something in the past. Mm-hmm. Where can I go to hear that? Say I want to hear something that Donnie had done.
So the best thing that I can recommend for you to do is go to my website, chambanajazz.com, and there's a link on the main page for recordings. And all of the recordings that I've posted are going to be listed on that page. I think right now I've got about 35 or 40 different recordings of jazz in this town, spanning from 1969 to last week. I just recorded a show Friday that at the Rosebowl that I'm getting ready to post on the site here in the next day or two. So it's a healthy mixture of shows that have occurred in the past, like I said, going back to the late 60s, as well as stuff that was in this town last week. So it's very current and also historical simultaneously. So there are some amazing recordings to be found in that archive of mine. And the vast majority of them that I'm posting are shows that I recorded myself, but not exclusively. There are a lot of people who have donated tapes to put in that archive. Some of them, these are a lot of times these are recordings that are made from the audience. They're not made from the soundboard, but they still sound pretty darn good. So, if you're curious about what's going on in this town and you're not sure if you want to go see a show yet because of COVID, or you just you're not sure if you want to commit to going out to seeing a show live like that yet, go to chambanajazz.com and listen to some of the recordings that are posted there. Poke around the site, shoot me an email, ask me a question, follow us on Facebook and Instagram. There's a lot of information that I throw out there about what's going on in the community currently, and also from a historical standpoint too.
Yeah,
I just happen to think Rich Palmer has given me a bunch of recordings over the years. Did he do those?
Yes, Rich Palmer has given me several recordings. Actually, Rich Palmer has given me some absolute gem recordings of Donnie Heitler, the piano player, with Rachel Lee, the vocalist, from. Yeah. I've got a gem of a show that I've posted up on the site now of Donnie Heitler with Rachel Lee at the Autumn Tree Restaurant in November of 1982, and wow. It's beautiful. It's so good.
That is amazing. Yep. It really is amazing. Thank God for that. Thank God for, people like you and Zach and I and others that just go out there with our cameras and recording devices. What do you use currently when you're recording?
Right now, right now I've got the most sophisticated setup I've ever had. I'm using a Zoom H6, which is a 4-track. There you go. Exactly. Okay. So the Zoom H6 is a 4-track recorder that can record at 24-bit, 48 kilohertz sampling rate. And I bought the optional input for the front, so I can record up to 6 tracks simultaneously in real time at 24-bit, 48 kilohertz rate. So most of the recordings that I'm making right now are 4-channel recordings. I've got 2 stereo microphones that I use. One I position up high on a stand at about 8 feet to capture the mid-range and the high end of the venue, and then I've got another stereo pair that I use much lower to the ground to capture the mid-range and the bass a little bit better, and then I merge 4 sources together.
So when you're going to record a show, yep. you don't just pop in and I'm going to record this. Are you prepared? Do you prepare the musicians?
Oftentimes, I mean, I've been doing this for so long that I've kind of developed a name for myself at this point as, oh yeah, that's that guy who records everything. So,
Like Mike Feldman.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
They used to call me Pitcher Girl, so
But every now and then I'll run into a situation where I'm recording a musician that I've never recorded before. I mean, with a university town, that happens, fairly regularly. And I always ask if I can record them. And, some of them are interested in having me record. Some of them don't want to be recorded. And, that's not a problem. I'm not going to push it if they don't want to be recorded.
Right.
Or, they may want to be recorded, but they don't necessarily want everybody in the whole world to hear it. So I'll send them a copy of the recording of their own show. And, they'll either say, yeah, that's good, go ahead and post it, or no, I don't want people to hear that.
Yeah.
Come record me another time. And if the show is better, then, maybe you can post that one.
So you don't really make arrangements with them pre. You just go.
I do. Sometimes I do, like especially if there's a really high profile show that's coming up. I'll send the musicians an email and say, hey, look, is it okay if I record this one? And sometimes the answer is yes, and sometimes the answer is no, and that's perfectly fine. But I'm not just an archivist. I'm also a musician, so I've played gigs with some of these folks. So they know me both as the guy who runs the website and the guy who records all the shows, but they also know me as the conga player and the percussionist. So I'm establishing a rapport with the musicians on more than one front. But the bottom line is, if it's somebody's show and they're doing a gig, it's their call as to whether it gets recorded or not.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, what do whereas when I first started, I would just pop in and take pictures,
right.
And then I would leave. I would stay for a while, listen to the music, all that kind of thing, and then I would leave and go to the next place. Mm-hmm. And I did that for years. Mm-hmm. And then everybody was like, "Who was that? What is she doing?"
Right.
And so one thing led to another. Here we are, 10 years later.
Right.
So
well, it's a little bit more difficult to sneak two stereo microphones and a giant recorder in,
you can't quietly go.
No, you really can't
put it on. I'm just gonna. Yeah, it's a kind of a little production, so.
Don't mind me.
Yeah.
Hey, could you tilt your saxophone this way, please?
That's so great. Yeah. We absolutely love what you're doing. Absolutely love this interview with you, Sean. We're so grateful for what you're doing and that you took time out on a Monday evening to spend with us. I honest to God feel so inspired and truly enlightened. Zach already knew a lot of this stuff. I didn't. So, so I feel a little more educated, I guess, with jazz music, and I guess that's what you're out to do,
I'm trying to promote the jazz musicians in this town. I'm trying to preserve local history, and I'm trying to make sure that as many people hear this music as possible, both in the music community and in the general public, because there is some heavy duty stuff going on in this town, and it's great. And I want everybody to get out and check it out.
Yeah, there you go. And that again, well said. That's how we feel about all the music and everything that's going on. It's we can't express this enough. I don't know how else we can express this to you. Yeah. Get there, go there, experience it, hear it, listen to it, fall in love with it, and and just let it be a part of your life and experience it. That's the biggest thing I think with live music is you want people to experience it, because once they do, they're not going to go back. They're going to be hooked. And so young people, getting them to even experience just a live show is, once they do, they're going to love it. But it's getting them to do that getting them off of the computers and getting them off of the cell phones and the places where sports bars and things like that. There's nothing wrong with any of that stuff, but for them to actually socially get involved and hear music that's live right in front of them, there's nothing like that.
Nope.
There really isn't.
You need to go, as I like saying, you need to go out and get some of it on you.
There you go. Yeah, and I used to say on our event list, now go out and get some. And I quit saying that, but I did that, and that's what I meant. Go out and get some of it. Like, figure it out. It's a great experience, and they have a blast. When you see people at a live show, they're always having a blast.
Mm-hmm.
We had all, as a community, just filled the streets of Champaign and had fun. Everybody had fun together.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what live music does.
Well, let's see if we
exactly what it does.
Let's see if we can do that again.
Let's do that.
Yeah. It would be nice to get all the musicians in town a little bit more credit and a little bit more recognition, but especially the jazz folks in this town. They're pouring their hearts out playing the stuff that they love, and it's worth checking out.
Well, I like your idea, and I think your thoughts earlier, and we'll close here with this, but I wanted to ask you about Jose too before we close. But your thoughts earlier on musicians supporting the jazz musicians as well, and just kind of like interlocking. I think that's important, and I think you made a really crucial point, and I think that will be heard, and I guarantee you that will be heard, and that will begin to happen.
Well, I'm certainly not the first person to propose such a cross-pollinization in this community.
I think you're the first person in a long time.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Wow, that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Let's go out and check out what everybody in the community is doing. The jazzers should go see some rock shows. The rockers should go see some jazz shows. The country music folks should go see some of everything. There's tons of music in this town, and it's all pretty damn good. So let's try to support each other. I still like the idea of getting a summit together. Frankly, I think the Rose Bowl would be a perfect place for that, because right now they are the venue in this town that is providing all types of music, jazz, rock, folk, bluegrass, everything.
Country. Yeah, they are.
The Rose Bowl is doing it all. And, like, if you haven't been to the Rose Bowl in a while, you're missing out, because that place is hip, and you need to go check it out.
Yeah. Thank you. Definitely. And support all of those that do that live music. And host live music, and there are a ton of places right outside of Champaign-Urbana that does host a lot of live music. There are a lot of them, but Champaign, for some reason, just kind of like you just minimized who has music and who just quit having it. So, but Urbana's, or that corner of Urbana,
it's a pretty happening place right now.
Yes. So anyway, we thank you so much, Sean. And what I wanted to close with was and we had talked about this pre the recording of the podcast, was your interview that you did with, it was Jose, right?
Jose Gobo. Yeah. Jose
Yes.
Gobo is, he is a force of nature. He is, so he's from Brazil. He moved to the States in like around 2011, 2012, somewhere in that neighborhood. Studied, he's a guitarist. He studied, he started off playing rock and roll in Brazil, just like, every other teenage musician, that was what he loved. Came to the United States in 2011 or so, studied in Iowa for quite a while, and then came to Champaign to finish up his graduate level studies, and is now on faculty at the University of Illinois at Springfield in their music department.
Oh, wow.
He's put out a couple of albums. The guy can play anything. I
have heard him a couple of times, and very impressed.
Yeah.
I've watched him play guitar, and I think, how does he do that?
Yeah. Yeah. He's an amazing guitarist. He's I mean, this town has got a lot of great guitarists in it, don't get me wrong, but uh Jose is a singular talent. The amount of stuff that he can do in various genres is just mind-boggling. I've played a handful of gigs with him, and the stuff that he comes up with is just, like there have been one or two times where I was playing where he ran a line off, or he played a chord sequence or something like that, and I had to stop playing because I was just so dumbstruck by what he just did on stage that I was like, what did he just do? That was amazing.
I can see that. Yeah.
And he's got several groups going on. He's one of the bands that he's got that he's involved with is called the House Trio, which is a three-piece. He's got him on guitar, a longtime bass player in town named Ben Taylor, and a drummer who's one of the grad level students here at the university studying in the jazz program, a guy from Serbia named Nikola Jokic. Djokic is his last name, Jokic. And they are a phenomenal trio, and they really play with a lot of intensity, but they also use a lot of space in their compositions, and they're playing original music. And
Oh, that's so cool.
and they just put out a CD a few months ago called Live from Home, and it's tremendous stuff. So if you like guitar music, I would definitely recommend you check out the House Trio. They're tremendous amounts of fun.
So what made you decide to interview him, and do you do interviews more often, or was that just
I've done a handful of interviews. I would like to do more. I've been toying with the idea of getting a podcast going for a while, but again, it just comes down to this is a sole proprietorship, and I'm doing this as a labor of love. I'm not making money doing the recordings. I'm not making money doing the website. I'm not making any money doing the historical research. I'm doing all of this because this is what gets me off, and this is there's only so many hours in the day. I've got a full-time job, I've got a relationship. I'm
bands,
doing,
got two
right. I got
bands.
two bands, I'm a busy guy.
And ham radio.
And ham radio
and
too,
Hammer?
right. So there's only so much time that I can devote to this. And, if I only have so much time that I can devote to it, it's more important to me to go out and record the bands that are playing now and get those recordings up on the website and use that as a promotional tool than almost anything else that I can be doing. The interviews are great. Don't get me wrong. I want to do more of them, but I'm going to have to learn how to balance my time a little bit better.
Timing is everything.
Yep.
Because I thought we'd do a podcast in I thought about it in 2019, and then 2020 happened, and then everybody kind of sat back and was like, what, don't know what's going to happen here. So we just kind of waited it out, and then had a really good photography year in 2021. So I just got done with that in December and was like, okay, you've pretty much got a blank until the end of January, February. Mm-hmm. Let's do the podcast, do it. So, and we're doing some other things, but that comes from wanting to really get everything out there, information out there in every way that you can. And so if we can, we will. But we will definitely do all we can to bring awareness to what you're doing.
Thank you.
And I think what you're doing is so crazy good. So good. And you're obviously, you are very good at it. We definitely hope that because Zach's already seen your bands, so I definitely hope to come and see both of your bands. And we're going to share your website. We'll be sharing your Facebook, and hope to get more people involved and see more people at some of the jazz shows. And let's just raise the bar. Let's bring it up. Let's do this.
You can find us on shambanajazz.com is the website. You can pick your favorite social media platform and just look for Shambana Jazz, and you'll find us. Subscribe, follow us, like us, do whatever you want to do. We'll keep you informed as to what's going on in the scene. and listen to the recordings, because I'll tell you, there is a lot of talent in this town.
Yeah, y'all gonna love that website because it's really great. It's informative. It's great. It's a great website. So Sean, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on to this podcast with us.
Oh man, thanks for having me. This has been tremendous.
Yeah, we'll see you. We will see you out and about in Champaign-Urbana.
Well,
I'm sure.
If you see somebody at a jazz show sitting behind a bunch of gear with a couple of microphones, that's probably me. Come up and say hi, but just try.
I was gonna say.
Be quiet about it.
We'll take a picture of you doing that.
Okay.
That's what we'll do. Oh, there's Sean doing his thing. We'll put our camera on silent.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, it's been really awesome, Sean. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Terry. Thanks, Zach.
Good night.
Yeah, thanks.